where do you see, if you've interacted with some of these more adult consumers, where do you see the disconnect starting to happen the most? Like, when do kids start to lose that understanding of food?
Ooh, that is an interesting question. So I'm on Twitter as well. I don't know if you're involved in that whole ag Twitter
kind of
situation.
I'm very disconnected from Twitter. I'm trying to learn.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. So before I became a PCA in my past life, I'm still a local representative. I'm Miss Central Valley, and in pageants or when I did like promotional modeling, when I kind of saw like a different set of people than from the ag space, I felt the disconnect with their knowledge. And unfortunately, as not trying to throw a bunch of people under the bus here, but you can't be trusting a Instagram blogger, guru, YouTuber for your information sources. And
hello and welcome to Talk Ag to Me, the podcast dedicated to improving ag literacy around the globe. I'm your host, Brennan Black, and in today's episode we're going to have a nice conversation, I think, about where the future of ag education needs to go. And to help me with this episode, I have Marcia. She's going to introduce herself real quick.
Hi, my name's Marcia Cripps.
So why don't you kind of give a description of your experience in the ag industry for our listeners?
So I'm Marcia. I'm originally from Nanjing, China, and then I came to the United States. I'm adopted. I grew up in mid-Michigan on a corn and soybean farm, and then I came out to the Central Valley of California 4 years ago definitely best risk that I ever took. And I am a pest control advisor for this local area, and while I've been out here, I've worked closely with the Plant Foundation, and that's where we work to connect kids to science through agriculture, and thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. I've followed your page for some time. I've kind of seen some of the posts you've made and some of the conversations you've had, and I was very interested in getting your perspective on some of these types of topics. It seems you're fairly passionate about it.
Yes, I am. I definitely am.
Awesome. Well, that's great. So before we get into the conversation part of it, would you mind kind of just explaining what made you want to pursue this career in agriculture and being a PCA?
All right, so I grew up around corn and soybeans, so naturally I grew up around ag and bothered my dad a lot growing up, and I didn't see myself going into a career field in agriculture at all. I went to school at Michigan State as an accounting major, and I took an ag science class as a blow-off class because I wanted an easy A, but it wasn't as easy as I predicted, but I found out I was more passionate about doing that work, and while I was in college, I still volunteered with the local 4-H program that I was a part of, and I really enjoy being around the youth just because that is our future. And that's how I got into ag, and then I became a pest control advisor because I was selling crop protection, and you kind of need that license in order to write a chemical rec. So legally, I was asked to go do it, and
awesome.
I wanted to follow the law.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's definitely a great way to get involved. I mean, I think that most people kind of get their gateway into agriculture at a young age from either 4-H or FFA, or at least being involved with one of those types of organizations. I mean, anyone who's listening to this knows that I was heavily involved in FFA, and it was just a big part of my life. It's the reason I even started this podcast. So what would you say, just from your experience by working with these youth, what have you kind of seen is the status of the current ag education system?
Non-existent. So I didn't grow up around the Central Valley, and you guys, your 4-H and FFA program, you are #blessed. Like the amount of funding you get, like I'm blown away. Like I remember in Michigan, we would have to do multiple fundraisers just to be able to go on a small field trip to like northern Michigan, let alone like an FFA conference. Like sometimes it had to come out of pocket to go. Wow. Or you just didn't go. Yeah. Simply. So, you guys are #blessed, and it's good to see out here that it is alive and well in the public school system, where I didn't do FFA because it just wasn't offered in my area. And I had to make like an hour drive if I even wanted to be a part of it, so it just wasn't worth it, which is too bad because I see the benefit from you and everyone else that has experienced it. And Yeah, it's unfortunate that across the country as a nation, we don't see ag science or ag literacy, for that matter, being presented.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And one of the things that I've advocated for since I was in high school, and I've talked about it in full extent on this podcast before, is the idea of, and I know this would be a very difficult thing to implement, but having ag classes be part of the required curriculum for all, high school, at least high school, maybe even younger. It's a difficult thing to implement, but I know that some school systems are working on that kind of thing right now. It's just not something that's easy to get massively spread, and part of that's due to the lack of conversations going on about agriculture in the public sphere. So
correct.
Yeah, I think that everyone can kind of benefit from some level of agricultural education.
Correct.
Yeah.
There is a disconnect. I've seen it. So as part of Plant Foundation, we do these live Zoom video calling. Yeah, we did Zoom calling before. It was cool. And
nice. We'd
go all over the world. I think we've gone as far as South Korea once. And then Canada. Yeah, northern border. And northern friends. And then a lot of rural communities signed up for that course. And I still remember vividly this town, they grew a lot of grains. And I was teaching our cotton course where I was showing them how we grow cotton here in Kings County. And I got to the slide where I was like, hey, does cotton come from an animal or a plant? And quite a few picked plant. I mean, not plant, they picked animal.
Yep.
And I'm glad their parents were not there to see that.
Yeah, no, I've had my fair encounter of similar question and answer situations that have kind of left me somewhat disappointed, to say the least. I've actually had people I've encountered that I've asked, hey, what's the difference between a cow and a bull? Full-grown adults, by the way, have asked what's the difference between a cow and a bull, and I've had some very interesting answers.
Yeah, that one too. That confuses even grown people. That cotton one, I'll let it slide because this was a group of second graders.
Sure,
so they just didn't know any better. But
yeah, but there comes a point where when adults are having a hard time understanding that information, it starts to kind of make you question what's really being talked about and what people are
exactly
reading and listening to. So,
correct.
So definitely, I think that it's an important conversation to have, not just with the consumer, but in the ag industry itself. We need to be talking to those agriculturalists and talk about why is it important that we teach the public, especially the younger generations, about where their food comes from. And I think we're starting to see that now. It's becoming more and more apparent that if they don't know, their parents start making voting decisions, start making purchasing decisions that impact our lives.
Yes, and then it's just the domino effect. It keeps going, and Earth isn't going to end anytime soon. So
exactly.
We better have a good long-term plan.
Exactly, yeah, no kidding. So what you say you've worked with second graders before. What different age groups have you worked with in terms of your education programs?
K through 12. So, with a lot of focus from that like K through 6th grade range.
Gotcha.
And then I kind of shift the conversation around like 7th, 8th grade to graduation to careers, talking about careers, because a lot of the disconnect at that age for me is that they don't realize all the work that goes in after the commodity has left the farm gate. Like, nobody thinks about logistics.
Right.
And in my opinion, just as a PCA and working with growers, that's what runs this industry.
Yeah.
Logistics.
No, absolutely. And yeah, I've had similar encounters. People, I mean, I can talk from my own high school experience. Those types of careers just aren't specified or as influent or what's the word I'm looking for? Emphasized.
Correct.
As a lot of the other. I mean, like, when you're in an ag classroom in high school, the jobs you learn about are farmer, vet, teacher, mechanic. That's about it. Maybe ag business, but like I didn't even know that ag communications or being a PCA or some of those careers were even available.
And very lucrative careers too.
Exactly. Yeah, and a lot. Yeah, like you said, a lot of people don't realize the processing and distribution parts of the food chain, or all of the in between steps that take from getting to farm to plate. And yeah, no, exactly.
Exactly. So I think that's where the conversation shifts. But in the lower grades, it's getting them to understand the basics. My favorite course that I teach, it's not agriculture based, but it's called the baloney detector test, where
interesting.
Pretty much I'll take a fake news article about ag, and then we try to figure out if it's baloney or
cool
actual fact.
I like that.
So I like doing that. The kids get a little kick out of the baloney.
So have you seen them? Have the kids been able to kind of like what?
They've done a really good job.
Okay.
found out kids, they're naturally curious and they're natural scientists, and unfortunately we kind of grow out of that curiosity as we get older. I think you've seen it yourself too. And they do a great job of it when they're given the right tools and not a lot of direction. Like I was surprised most of the time I don't really have to give them a lot of direction. They kind of figure it out on their own. But the main takeaway from doing that activity, I think, for every kid that I've encountered is that you just can't take anything for face value. And yeah, sometimes the best thing you can do is just not share or comment. Or I really like to spread awareness that you need to be able to be okay with saying, I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah,
no, exactly. That's a really good message for them to figure out. It took me a while to kind of figure that out myself.
Exactly. And it's hard to admit sometimes. It's easier said than done.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's a foundation for a lot of issues in today's society. But with the ag conversation particularly, it definitely causes a lot of issues on both sides of the conversation there.
Correct.
So when it comes to the fact checking kind of stuff that you've done with the kids, what procedure do you go through to help them figure out whether or not something is worth believing?
The scientific method. We go through that scientific method and we go one by one. You form a hypothesis, which is, I think this is true, or I think this is total baloney. And then you go through action steps, you gather your information, and you repeat, involve a friend, have them do their own research, see if you come up with the same thing, and check each other. And I always tell people or kids mostly, I think adults also should listen to this too, that in science, things change.
Oh, yeah.
And you got to be open to that change and be okay with the fact that, yes, this might be true today, but if new pieces of information come out and with new innovations, things can be different.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a great approach to handling that style of education.
Correct, and that it's not black and white.
Right. Yeah.
And life is not like that.
Yeah. No, and that's a huge thing for kids to learn. It's a huge thing for adults to learn too, apparently. But no, I think that's great. And one of the things I try to push a lot on this podcast and when I'm on other people's podcasts is that I do a significant amount of research on all these topics, but I'm by no means an expert. So anything that I say, look it up, and if you can find 5 articles that agree with what I say, then it's probably worth believing.
Correct. Exactly. And then it's important to build a network too. I learned that as a PCA when you become a professional career person. It's you're never going to know everything.
Right.
But you can always count on your network and your mentors to know more than you do, and vice versa. Yeah, no, exactly. That's a great thing to take away. So when it comes to, I know you're more oriented towards the kids side of things. Correct. I've been taking somewhat of a different approach to my education style with the podcast. I usually talk to more adult consumers. Correct. Where do you see, if you've interacted with some of these more adult consumers, where do you see the disconnect starting to happen the most? Like, when do kids start to lose that understanding of food? Ooh, that is an interesting question. So I'm on Twitter as well. I don't know if you're involved in that whole ag Twitter kind of situation. I'm very disconnected from Twitter. I'm trying to learn. Yeah. No, it's interesting. So before I became a PCA in my past life, I'm still a local representative. I'm Miss Central Valley. And in pageants, or when I did like promotional modeling, when I kind of saw like a different set of people than from the ag space, I felt the disconnect with their knowledge. And unfortunately, as not trying to throw a bunch of people under the bus here, but you can't be trusting a Instagram blogger, guru, YouTuber for your information sources. And I'm not trying to point a blame at anybody or an institution, but I feel like growing up, learning the scientific method or being able to think critically wasn't pushed. And that's where I think that conversation when you were talking about earlier, to get ag science into the public school system, we need to be teaching these kids how to think critically. Oh, absolutely. And that's something, I completely agree. That's something I've been advocating for forever. I mean, I'm studying to be a teacher right now, so that's something. Right. Yeah, that's something I'm really trying to influence, is that these kids need to be taught how to think, not what to think. Correct. And then, as much as I hate to say it, but everybody's on their phones now. That's adults too, and a lot of the demographic that I've seen that is very much confused or doesn't quite understand what's fact or baloney, is in that generation where, I guess, what is it? Not a millennial or
so it's
Gen Z? Or,
it's millennial, then cusper, then Gen Z.
Oh, I've not heard of that one. Okay.
That's my generation. It's kind of a weird cusper.
Yes, but I don't want to point that finger at a generation because I've also seen much older people in an older demographic also be very much confused. Yeah. So I think the best thing we can do is to have conversations like this that are candid and have an open dialogue on a podcast or just in our everyday homes. And I'm so glad that when I go on social media now, I do see more like, man, I hate to say it, ag influencers. Yeah. At least I didn't say the other word.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah. No, I think that you definitely have a point. And I think that ag has been somewhat at a disadvantage for a while now because, for the longest time, agriculture's main focus was just producing the best product it can. And that still should be a primary focus. But as the communication industry, quote unquote, evolved, we went from listening to radio and watching TV to now we're on Facebook every day and Instagram and, we're listening to podcasts. Like as media evolved, agriculture just didn't catch that train quite as quickly. Yes. And that kind of put us behind the ball a little bit.
Correct. We're at a disadvantage. And I hate to say it, but I almost feel like we're a good 10 years behind everybody else when we should have been here 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And that's why I always advocate for those who have a social media presence or who at least understand how social media can be used and they support agriculture. Yeah, they need to use that to the best of their ability to try to promote that message.
Yes, and also not be afraid to take that message outside of the ag space.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, unintentional or intentionally, we sometimes end up preaching to the choir, which is okay. Like if you're doing an ad for like herbicides, then I hope you're preaching to the choir and you're not going to somebody that's like works as an accountant. Like,
right. Yeah.
That makes no sense.
Yeah. No. And that's something that that's another thing that it kind of took me a while to figure out, but I've been working really hard with the podcast. I've seen a couple other people try it too, but going to those non-ag communities and bringing the message back to them, and not the message of, hey, you guys should support your local farmers, the message of like, here's a way that you can relate to what we're doing here.
Exactly.
Like, I'll give you an example. So in an episode, actually it's the episode that went up at the time of recording this last week, but at the time of posting, it's been a couple months now, we did an episode with my buddy Patrick, and him and I were talking about just robots, and we were talking about ag tech and all this fun stuff, and he knows I'm a fan of Star Wars, and so he he asked me which
canon or
so Legends is okay. It depends on the Legends, but I follow it all, but he asked me which Star Wars droid I thought would be the best farming robot, which was a very interesting conversation. Okay. And we had about a 10-minute discussion about it, which was really fun. And I actually took that question and went to an online Star Wars community. And I said, guys, I actually did an episode on my podcast where we talked about which Star Wars would make a fun farming robot, because we use a lot of robots in agriculture. And I kind of explained the premise to him. And I brought that question to the panel, and people were like excited about it. They were conversing about it. They were debating about it. And it was really cool to see people talk about agriculture, but in a Star Wars context.
I like that. I like that idea. It's like connecting them to ag through Star Wars.
Exactly. Yeah, and I've done that with video games. I've done it with movies. I mean, like anything you can use to relate to ag. If it, because one of the things I've seen is that people say all the time, "Well, we need to speak their language," and they think that means just dumbing down the message. That's not how you communicate with them. Mm-hmm. You have to put it in a context that they can relate to and understand.
Correct. You got to make, like you said, your Star Wars example. You got to make that example for them. Or for me, I feel like. For beauty, the beauty industry, or like especially young women around my age that are trying to be healthy and fit, I like to talk about chocolate milk, so I'm really into running and working out. And there are so many ads that I can't even narrow it down for recovery drinks. Oh yeah. And still, I would rather go to a local dairy like Rosa's or Top of the Morn and drink chocolate milk. I get way more recovery out of doing that than drinking some like fruit powder thing.
Yeah, and that's a great way to, like, if you can hit them right where they care about most, that's like the easiest way. Like I have I don't know if you know Tyler Rivera, he's a local dairyman. He has an Instagram page called California Dairy Dad.
I'm pretty sure I follow it.
Okay, so him and I did an episode a little while back, and he talks about in his in the episode we did that he because his entire page is based around how he raises his kids and, you know, how he spends a bunch of time with his family, but he incorporates it to the dairy that he owns. And
awesome.
So he goes on pages where they talk about kids and, you know, like childhood development and all this kind of stuff. And he posts pictures of him playing with his kids. There's a cow in the background and everyone's like, wait, what's the cow for? And so he almost like subliminally, but that's not the word I'm looking for. But he basically brings agriculture to them in a context that they could understand and care about.
And then it's a natural.
Right.
Yeah, it's not natural that he's bringing it up.
Right. You're not just like trying to shove it down their throat. At that point, you're letting them accept it in their own way.
Exactly.
So I think that is one of the... it's definitely one of the newest approaches we've taken to ag communications, but I think it has one that has a lot of potential to be a good way of communicating.
I agree, and then I'm just like glad that now there's more people that aren't afraid to share what they're doing. Yeah,
and that's a big thing that I have noticed as well, is that a lot more it's more popular with the younger generation of agriculturalists or people at least involved in supporting the industry, but a lot of people nowadays are starting to see the value in transparency.
Exactly.
And like we have, you know, I've talked to a couple hog farmers and some dairymen, and Tyler's one of them, that they believe that the more you hide, and I believe this as well, the more you hide, the more they have to fear.
Exactly.
And so by exposing as much of the industry as possible, by explaining it and in a way that they can understand, that helps, you know, that conversation become a lot more smooth.
Exactly. Especially when it comes to like talking about chemicals.
Yes.
In ag. I know that's a sensitive topic to anybody, both inside and outside.
Right, yeah.
And being able to just explain it in terms that are easy to understand is the key, and also being open to having that conversation. And yeah, I really hope that any PCAs or CCAs that are listening to it are going to be more open to talking to their friends that are outside of ag about it. Because
exactly.
It's not as scary once you go over it.
No, exactly. And yeah, you know, like you said, everyone hears chemicals and they think, oh, no, you know, like...
We're gonna die.
Yeah, cancer and poison, and why are you putting it on my food? And yeah, it becomes a very dangerous conversation. But if you explain to them, like, hey, you know, we put these things on your food, that way it's safer, not more dangerous. And,
exactly. Or seed treatments, too. I found out a close friend of mine was afraid of seed treatments, and... The best way that I could explain it to her, I'm like, you put sunscreen on every day. That's honestly it. It's just putting sunscreen on the seed and protecting it. Yeah, no, exactly. And I think once you, like, I was talking to a buddy of mine from Canada on an episode, and he was asking me, because he has kids and he wants to start a little garden, he was asking me different questions about it. And he had mentioned something about, you know, like, how can we, like, how do we know that the food that we eat in the store is like not covered in pesticides? And I was like, well, it's important to understand the steps that has to go through before. First of all, the steps the pesticide has to go through to get approved, and second of all, the steps the food has to go through before it hits your shelf. There's a whole cleaning process. There's a whole, you know, there's a testing person that comes around, and hey, if it doesn't, and we're pretty strict about it in the U.S. If it doesn't hit a certain number, it's out. Yeah, exactly. And so after I explained that to him, he was like, oh, I didn't realize there was a whole, like, you know, process. And after explaining that, excuse me. You're fine. Aww. I cut that out. No, but... you're okay. I was going to say, you probably have editing powers.
So. Oh, yeah. No, I've learned a few tricks.
Good.
But so after explaining that, he was like, oh, I didn't realize there was a whole process to that. That makes me feel a lot better.
Exactly.
So it's just a matter of, you know, helping them understand that we don't just, you know, throw it in the ground, and as soon as it's grown up, we put it on the shelf. Like there's a lot of hands that touch that food.
Exactly, and that's why I'm glad that I love TikTok. I'm gonna go on ahead and just admit it right now. That's why I love TikTok, because you see all these behind the scenes. I don't think gets shared on other social media platforms. And yeah, if you're trying to hit, at least for me, my target is children. That's where I need to be at, and then. On Twitter, I found out that's more of an adult space that I talk to, and more of a professional space, kind of semi-professional space. But no, it's good to have a dialogue. I think that's the most important takeaway with no matter what you're talking about. Not a monologue, but a dialogue.
No, exactly. And that's always been, that's a big thing that I push as well. It doesn't matter if you change their mind, as long as you introduce the information, they absorb it properly.
Exactly.
Like, it's just a matter of, are they willing to talk about it? And if they are, then you've already made tremendous strides.
Exactly. And then, and also, don't be upset whenever you see... This is my, I guess one of my pet peeves, is whenever I see something that happens against ag, or whenever the ag community feels attacked. Like, I hate to bring it up again, but that Burger King situation.
Oh, yeah.
Which, I'm glad that people did complain, and that it did end up causing some kind of change. But I still remember that day. I went on, it didn't matter what social media platform I was on, except TikTok. So that's why I like TikTok. It didn't show it. It just showed people dancing.
Yeah.
I just saw that video.
Yeah.
And I have followers on Twitter that have nothing to do with ag.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought it was positive because they saw it being reshared so much.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, I know there's a lot of feelings hurt in that one, but yeah, it goes back to whenever I tell my kids, sometimes it's best just not to share it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I've had that conversation as well, and I've been meaning to do an episode on the Burger King episode, the whole thing that went on, but I haven't found the right context to talk about it in, but it's an important conversation to have because, a kid might see that and wonder, why are all the farmers mad at this? Or an adult might see that and wonder why are all the farmers mad about this kind of thing. Like, lower methane, that sounds like a great thing. And so you have to explain to them, what this means for agriculture and what... And
also how much of a percentage agriculture is to that whole pie.
Exactly, yeah.
Greenhouse gases.
Right, and yeah, it's just an understanding of knowing who you're talking about and who you're talking to that's kind of missed from that conversation.
I don't know if you follow him. I think his last name is Dr. Foley. Yeah, you'd have to look this up later.
Okay.
He has an awesome presence on social media, and he had he talked about that whole Burger King situation, and he had this amazing graphic that showed how small of a sliver that was, and then the biggest part of the pie was actually electricity. So,
interesting.
Yeah, like, everything that powers your house to charging your car up. And that was the biggest pie. Or like your oven, for example. And you just don't think about it, but it adds up because everybody uses electricity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's really interesting.
Nobody's outraged about that. So.
Right, yeah. Well, we don't have to go too far down this rabbit hole, but it's worth mentioning that, and since we're on this topic, that when everybody stayed inside for a long period of time, the numbers went down and ag was still going. So I mean, there's a certain
we didn't stop.
No, yeah, we couldn't. The cows don't take Christmas off.
Exactly. The bugs still showed up. I still had to spray for them.
Exactly. So yeah, it's just, but the consumer doesn't think about those things, and it's difficult. In high school, I learned that it's almost like the norm to blame the consumer for not knowing, and that's not the right mindset to have because, how do we expect them to know when we're not teaching them? Exactly. And so I've kind of shifted my thinking on that, over the past few months after talking to people about this and figuring out that they're not against us, they just don't know. And
it's not anybody's fault really.
Right, yeah, exactly. And so it's just a matter of, and I think that a lot of people in agriculture need to kind of have that realization as well. And
correct.
Realize that if they would just teach them about what's going on instead of just saying, well, they're not going to get it, we're not going to get it, we're not going to try.
Yeah, and then also the struggle that I'm having too is finding out what's in it for them because, at the end of the day, I still don't even know how my iPhone is made. Well, actually, no, never mind, I take it back. I did watch a documentary, and it's actually really scary.
Yes, it is.
There's a lot of child labor stuff that I don't want to go into that freaks me out, but average person doesn't know how an iPhone is made, and they don't complain about it because, well, what's in it for them? Right. So, and I think, I'll be honest, I don't have an answer to that, and I'm still trying to. With kids, I found out this is why I like being Miss Central Valley so much, is that when you're talking to an audience of 5-year-olds, they see a crown on a young lady's head, they're like, oh my gosh, you're a princess! And getting that attention, I found out that first 5 minutes of undivided attention is so hard, and that's the only example I can think of right now where I can bypass that.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's a good, I don't know if you're familiar with the Dairy Princesses that we have here.
Yes.
They have a very similar stance on that. Yeah, they're able to take that kind of, royal, almost like fantastic kind of, fantasy kind of, approach to it. Because that's how kids think. They think very visually. And so when they see something they look at that's very pretty and very oh, that's cool, she's a princess, they're almost more inclined to trust it kind of.
Exactly. So... now to find that for an older generation.
Right. And I think, and there's still a lot to be explored and experimented with in terms of how to communicate with them properly. But I think kind of the approach I was talking about earlier, finding what matters to them and putting it in the context of what matters to them might be the golden goose that we have of getting that word across. I agree.
And being creative too and artistic.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I've seen people that actually take very creative approaches to that kind of conversation, and I'm trying to think of what I saw the other day, but people, I think that if we start to have the conversation of, because the conversation I've seen, and even from the ag side of this, has been kind of more vocal about this in the non-ag side, which I think is kind of something we need to tell the farmers they need to stop it. But we've seen a lot of the farmers over here and the consumers over here, and that's how it needs to stay, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that if we think about it more of the perspective of we're all in this together, we need the consumers as much as they need us, then we can start to kind of incorporate, like, why don't we have agricultural artists or agricultural, like people involved in different industries that are still advocating for agriculture.
Exactly.
And, bringing those mediums to different groups that they're not being brought to.
Correct, yes. And then I also think this is a whole other bigger problem too, but we need to find different ways to distribute food.
Yes.
As well. And I know it's harder because it's a food commodity product, but
right.
Being able to ship it to people's houses, especially after this whole COVID thing.
Right.
I hate making the comparison, but like the beauty industry, for example, like before you just go to the drugstore and you get like mascara. I know you can't relate to this.
Yeah.
I mean, but if you do, I mean, that's totally cool too. Makeups for everybody. And like now you buy from your favorite influencer.
Right.
And you buy it on like their website.
Right.
Storefront. And I'm starting to see ag also go in that direction.
Yeah.
But I think that's something we should explore and just see what happens.
Yeah.
You don't know till you try.
Absolutely. And that kind of ties into another thing that I was meaning to bring up with this conversation that I think a lot of people are missing on both sides is that, farmers have a personality. And if they show that personality, that helps way more than they tend to think.
Exactly. And then for me growing up, I never saw a farmer or somebody on the production side of ag that looked like myself. So I know nobody can see this. I'm Chinese, Japanese, American.
Oh, yeah.
And I just never saw another female minority
right.
as an agronomist or a PCA or CCA. Until I moved out here, then I saw more people of color, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's another important thing too, that a farmer doesn't have a stereotypical look.
Right, yeah, exactly. And that's, that's another thing. People, when they think of farmer, they think of, the guy in overalls with a pitchfork and he's milking his one cow. Yeah.
Yep.
The fact that the farmer as an image has evolved so much over time, and if we start introducing that as like, hey, look, farmers come in all kinds of shapes, sizes, and colors. Like,
exactly.
And if we introduce the idea that, like, because I think that people who have the perspective of a farmer, they think of one of two things. Either, like I said earlier, or they think of some kind of business tycoon that's just out to make money and he's just like a corporate,
Exactly.
And if we introduce the idea that like these guys have families too, they're eating the food that is being grown, that they're consumers as much as you're a consumer kind of thing, then that might help them understand
exactly
a little bit easier at least.
Yeah. Now, if we could only just replicate this everywhere.
Right. And it's just a matter of, it's a long road ahead, but it's just a matter of, like you said, we're 10 years behind in this thing. We need to really push it as far as we can and try different things and see what works and what doesn't.
Well, I have hope. I mean, there's young people like yourself and a lot of other young people all around the world that are stepping up to the plate. I think doing something such as this is that one or two steps forward, and I feel like if everybody just takes a couple steps forward and actively participates, we'll get there.
I sure hope so. I have hope as well, and I think that it's just a matter of, people like us and people like I mentioned earlier who have the passion for it and who care about it, getting out there and just making sure that they make sure their voice is heard.
Exactly. And then, and then I think as a community too, we got to be willing to help everybody out.
Yes, exactly.
And work together, not against each other.
Right, and do our best to make sure that everyone understands what the long-term and short-term consequences are of every action we make.
Exactly. No,
So,
I like this.
yeah, no, I think it's
You're doing a great job.
Thanks. I think it's a fun project, and it's definitely one that is kind of an early stage of what I'm trying to develop. I'm still trying to figure out, what I want to do with this, but I'm just kind of trying to have the conversation flowing and see where it takes me kind of thing.
Exactly. No, I think this is a great idea.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it.
You should have like a Star Wars episode now.
I've considered doing specialized episodes just like, okay, today we're going to talk about Star Wars and ag. How are we going to bring these two together kind of thing? Or
exactly.
Like I'm actually going to record an episode with these guys I met online. We're going to talk about movies and how they relate to ag. Like we're going to talk about The Martian and how he grows potatoes on Mars and how that could be related to
Oh yeah, the one with Matt Damon.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, just like fun stuff like that. Try to bring more of a, like I said, a relatable medium to them.
Exactly.
So
no, I agree.
Awesome.
Any other questions that we want to cover?
I think that's pretty much. I think that was a pretty good conversation we've had. I really can't think of anything else. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that.
No, I think we hit the main points that we needed to.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, this is awesome.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you coming on. It was definitely...
Oh, yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me. I'm glad that you were, close by.
It makes it definitely a lot easier than having a phone call.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I did this with, what was it, Rob Sharkey. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was, via phone call, and it was, and I was, driving down the road, too.
Oh, yeah.
And, you could hear, the background noise, and...
Yeah, no.
I was, walking fields that day, and, I, pulled in, and, the... ranch manager walked by and was like, "Hey, Marcia, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm doing a thing. Leave me alone."
Yeah, no, the audio is definitely one of the hardest things to work with this whole thing. But I've been fairly fortunate for the second season. Most people are either able to come in person, or if they're not, they at least have their own they can record using their own software and they can send it to me, kind of thing, which has been very nice. So this is much more ideal.
So cool. Yeah.
So
what range of guests? I've heard obviously this current season, but before, was it just mainly ag space then?
Yeah, so that was kind of the issue I was trying to get out of, was that I was preaching to the choir, like we talked about earlier. I was basically having the conversation with farmers for farmers, and it wasn't getting anywhere.
What about local scientists?
I actually did bring in a couple soil scientists from the USDA, which is really cool to talk to.
Awesome.
And I was trying to bring in more of those types of, and I'm always open to having conversations with people of those backgrounds.
I don't think who's around here that's just talk to that individual. I'll think of it. Their specialization was climate change.
Oh, cool.
So when you said the whole
the
Burger King thing.
Yeah, I'd be willing to... Basically, the whole point of the second season is to just have conversations about things people are not having conversations about. And really is to try to bring it to the consumer and really just... be direct and bring consumers on here and talk about these kinds of things, but also have the conversation of what are we missing? What do we need to be talking about more?
Actually, I got an idea. Talking about race and discrimination. I know that's a hard topic to go over, and you have to have a good person that's comfortable and trained to talk about it.
Right. Without it falling into a
or as a woman too. As much as it hurts me to say this, but there's just some things that I go through that a lot of my male coworkers don't have to worry about, and that's something as small as finding a safe place to park. Right. Sometimes, especially at trade shows before COVID, it's the World Ag Expo here in Tulare. I mean, Tulare is a safe place, but during that time, there's people from all over the place. Yeah,
and there's a lot of different types of people there.
And when you're working a booth, you work late, and I'm not gonna lie, it's scary walking to your car sometimes.
Oh yeah, I bet.
And you have a bunch of boxes, and you're not in a strong state.
Right. Yeah, I can't imagine that's a kind of position to be in.
Exactly. Sometimes I'm very lucky I'm not surrounded by too many of these characters, but I felt it where I don't know if I'm being judged on my merit or given a fair shot at something. Yeah, no, I think that having conversations about who all's involved in these kinds of things and what they do and what purpose they serve is very important. Exactly. So yeah, no, I look forward to hearing all the rest of these. Thanks again or I guess I reached out, but for responding and for being involved and I look forward to our live thing as well too. This episode's gonna go up probably a little bit after we do that, but people are listening to it. Yeah, exactly. People will be like, "Oh yeah, this is when they recorded it." But I definitely look forward to doing more conversation style things with you and with people of your and then I'm close by too. So, you can always do a follow up or something. Yeah, exactly. That'd be great. So I think that's all I have for this. Do you have a Twitter? I do. So I'll add you. And if you have anything you want to plug for the episode, by all means, you can add that as well. Oh, okay. Anywhere you want people to find you or to pitch your stuff. I'm gonna create my own website finally. Perfect. I'm trying to do the same thing right now. So that's my personal, and then the other one's just Talk Ag to Me. So I just kind of wrapping up things here. Thank all of our guests and listeners and everyone listening and tuning in, and I think that anytime we can have conversations about these things is a good thing, no matter
where it goes or what side people are on about it. So yeah, for anyone listening, if you have any questions for Marcia, reach out. She seems to be very talkative and likes to likes to have conversations with people. Not in a bad way. I mean that she has a lot of live streams and a lot of people interactions with the community and that kind of thing. So it's good to have people like that out there.
I appreciate it. Thanks. Good save there.
No, I didn't want that to come across as...
No, you're okay. I'm just giving you a hard time.
Okay. But yeah, so yeah, thanks all you for tuning in. Did you have anything you wanted to plug before we close out here?
I guess, yeah. You guys can reach out to me anytime. My DMs are always open, and it can be about anything, seriously, even if it's just a vent. Mental health is very important. Mm-hmm. I know we didn't cover that today, but very important right now in ag. And you can find me at Crop Queen Marcia. Yeah. Cool. So can't wait to get to know you all, and thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for having me today. Yeah, and thank you for coming on. I'll link all that in the description, but that's all we have. And don't forget, if you ate today, thank a farmer.